Good evening, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting content. Starting my watch. It took me 2 months, but I was able to save up enough for a new watch battery. Yay! I guess that makes me a successful artist, huh? Birthday, I didn't blow my brains out, and I got a functional watch. Nice. So here we go. Today we're going to put in an angelfish in the sky and some clouds behind him. I may not get to the clouds, but I've got some Prussian blue, phthalo blue, mixed up for the dark areas of the fish, and some bright white for the white areas. Oh, let me go put something else on. That's the end of my rubric.
I call down then the trialogue mode. Psychedelics and mathematics.
Alright, that'll do for the moment.
Well, the questions that you posed
There we go.
in all of that,
Alright, here we go.
the nuts
Let me
and
put this
bolts
up a little higher.
question is, can it be visualized with technologies ranging from paint and brush to supercomputers? I think it can. I think it is not in principle mysterious, that it's a domain to be explored. It may be fleeting, like the situation that follows upon the splitting of the atom or something like that. It may be remote, but it is in principle describable, and it's simply a matter of paying attention, gaining inspiration, and gaining skill of technical execution. I think you think that, don't you?
Well, I think that any models that we can build, verbal, visual, or mathematical, are really, really feeble compared to the experience itself. On the other hand, this experience is within all, and without all, and we are immersed in this spiritual world. So the tiniest resonance from the most feeble model may suffice to excite, as poetry excites emotion, to excite spirit. And this is the essence of communication, is to have a compact representation. So the experience is infinitely complex. And the representations have to be really simple. But the representation restricted to verbal mode alone might be too feeble, not similar enough to excite by resonance the similar state. I mean, we have the situation where we agree that not every person is going to become a cephalopod. Not every person has the time to become a shaman. But we need a certain number of shamans in our culture to help to reconnect human society and the planet of the sky. So we need some kind of amplifying and communicating device between the few people who are real shamans, let's say sacred artists of the future, and the mass society watching MTV. And so the question is, can these means be of use to the clarion call that you've given in your book?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what makes it confusing is when you go into these domains, the encounter is an emotionally powerful one, and the situation is so novel that the experient tends to assume that this emotional power is coming from the input. It's not. It's coming from the encounter with the input. I mean, it's like posing the question, can you make a stirring record of the Grand Canyon? Yes, you can, with helicopter-mounted cameras and this sort of thing. But the emotion you have watching that, you bring to it. So the psychedelic dimension is objective, but it's also so awesome and so different from what we know that it encourages and promotes and triggers awe in us. And so we bring something to it which we can never image or reduce to a verbal description or a piece of film. But in principle, I think the thing itself is just more of reality. It's like the heart of the cell, the radar maps of the Venusian surface, the center of the atom. I mean, these are real
This kind of reality, we don't need more of this. We've already got so much.
No, we need more of this mental logos world. It's the logos world that we've lost the connection with. And so these computer programs, psychedelic drugs, dynamic modeling schemes are the equivalent of probes like Voyager. But they're sent not to an alien planet, but to an alien phase space of some sort, but one that we need connection to.
I agree with Terence. The problem is one of the emotional intensity of a psychedelic experience is totally different from seeing the computer graphic display, the kind we saw. And it's possible to get something a bit like that just by shaking a kaleidoscope and looking into it. And in these expensive novelty shops that dot California, one can find fancy kaleidoscopes, beautifully made, and people buy them, I suppose, and you look through them, and within a few seconds you're just bored. Nobody ever really looks at them for very long. You can see a dazzling series of displays of pattern and colour, but somehow they have no meaning and don't engage one. And I think the difference between representation of the state and being in the state itself is this sense of meaning, engagement and intensity. And that, I think, is the problem, because I don't think it's just the graphic representation. I think it's that meaning and intensity that we can find in many areas. I, for one, being a botanist, am very drawn to flowers. I love looking at flowers, and sometimes you can look at a whole garden full of flowers, like here in Esalen, and it's quite meaningless. At other times, you can look at a single flower for a long time. You can go into it. It's like a mandala. You enter into this realm, and it takes on incredible meaning, beauty, and significance. And the realm of flowers is one that's explored these mandala-type, almost psychedelic spaces, if you like. And one can sometimes enter into it, and sometimes one doesn't. The same with butterflies and many other natural creations. So it seems to me the problem is how to enter into that engagement, intensity, and sense of meaning, rather than representation of the pattern itself, because there's plenty of patterns around in the natural world.
No, but these are space-time patterns. And whereas we can say the words space-time pattern, we nevertheless have no language for individual space-time patterns. Within space-time pattern, as experienced by us, as perceived by us, there is a kind of resonance between different patterns that we see. Let us say the bobbing kelp forest in the ocean out here. That somehow makes different elements of a space-time pattern make a resonance with different space-time patterns
get fallen trees and slice them up
cortex or something. So
this burning day and night for the past
perceived, and
13 days or so.
Are not. They remain invisible to us.
And
yet we
anyway,
don't have any language for
now
what we
out
perceive.
of
So we can't,
easily
as
accessible fallen
Rupert
trees.
suggested, have
And the
data
cat, as well as
storage
myself, are
and
addicted to
retrieval
fire.
on this level. We don't have
Which is
language
pretty
for
nice,
that. You've
but it
been,
did eat up a
say,
lot of my time.
speaking of the flowers in the
Cleaned up a lot
garden,
in the yard
or
this
the
week,
images
though,
in
so
the
it's looking a lot
kaleidoscope. These
nicer.
are static patterns. We have extensive verbal
Round
language
and
for that.
about.
So
All
what
the
I'm
dead trees
suggesting
gone. Which he's hungry.
is
No, Paul.
an
I don't want fire.
expansion of our visual
no fire, I
linguistic
don't hungry.
capability in the direction of a universal language for space-time
Okay.
patterns, such that we could then speak of our experience. We could remember space-time pattern experiences, call them by name. We could mention to each other the mere drop of a word or a code, an I-75, a Highway 1, a Highway 0, and then we would be
Oh, yeah, Bubbles.
transmitting a huge image of a space-time pattern along with whatever emotion you remember from the time when you experienced that. Awakening this in the mind of the listener, and therefore able to converse, intellectualize, understand, and reconnect with the space-time pattern of and feeling of the spiritual world. I mean, let's face it, we've had the most extensive experience of this world through visual metaphors of, well, movies. We experience the logos as movies. We don't experience it as words, although there are sounds and there are words pop up from them. Sometimes there's writing on the wall like graffiti. Basically, it's an infinite field of consciousness, of vibration, of waves moving, of intelligence which may be disconnected in different parts. And when we travel in this realm, we go somewhere we've been before and we recognize it, and that excites in us memory, which is reinforced, which is extended, upon which we can do further experiment because we do remember that somehow our mental faculty, individually and within, it has data storage and retrieval, and it has a language or something, and yet we can't share it. Even when it's just say us three, we have many experiences which I trust, I have great faith, are similar, that are universal experience, and yet we are absolutely speechless in verbalizing them to each other so we can see whether we had or didn't have any similarity in this certain I'm sorry, we're expanding.
Well, I don't know. It seems to me that art or that mind responds, it has an affinity for itself. And if it's universal, then it has an affinity for the universal mind. What's interesting about the example of the kaleidoscope is it's boring after a few minutes. We all agree on that. If you analyze how it works and take it apart, the base units in most kaleidoscopes are pieces of broken glass, pebbles, things like this, detritus, junk, and somehow splitting this into 6 sections with a mirror and putting it in heavy oil is supposed to bring you to the realm of something watchable and interesting, but it isn't. The brain machines being produced in Germany are the same way. All patterns seems to quickly lose its charm unless it's pattern that has been put through the sieve of minds, any mind, so that we enjoy looking at ruins and the artifacts of vanished civilizations a lot more than random arrangements of natural objects. So it seems to me what we're looking for when we say it's like a DMT trip, the MPPI data on chaos, then what we're saying is, aha, here in this pattern there is the footstep, the footprint of meaning. It's as though an architect passed through here, and so we can appreciate it. So we're always looking for the betraying presence of an order that is more than an order of, I don't know even how to say it, economy, I guess. We look for an aesthetic order. And when we find that, then we have this reciprocal sense of recognition and transcendence. And this is what the psychedelic experience provides in spades. Now, a critic of the psychedelic experience would object, of course it's made of mind. It's made of your mind. But for the psychedelic voyager, this does not seem to be obvious. The intuition is, it is made of mind, but it is not made of my mind. So then either there's an identity problem or a real frontier of communication is being crossed. But I think when we say we look for living pattern or aesthetically satisfying order, what we really mean is we look for the sign that mind has somehow touched the stochastic processes of nature.
Yes, but still the limiting factor seems to be neither the richness of display we find in nature, nor even the language that we can communicate with, but rather the ability to go into something with intensity of vision. Because I don't think language is a limiting problem. I mean, for example, music can be written down in a language. You can get a score of Beethoven's symphonies or Mozart piano concertos. I mean, I can read music, but for me, it doesn't come to life from this language. I have to hear it for it to come to life. The language is indeed a kind of communication, but it has to come to life. Presumably mathematical notation is a form of notating things in the mathematical landscape which mathematicians can see. And take the realm of plants again. If you look at the incredible richness of botany, of flower forms, there is a language for this. It's used by botanists and florists. You've got books, about there are words for these different kinds of flowers. And for a botanist, the whole thing can be written down in this specialized language. But even so, it doesn't mean that most botanists spend most of their time contemplating the beauty of flowers. They're sort of rushing to the next committee meeting or getting their paper ready for the next public journal or something. That somehow there isn't much time spent in actually entering into these realms, even for people whose profession it is to be concerned with them. So we're neither short of images nor of languages in many realms, but rather of the time, the space, and the inclination to enter into these realms, to be within them.
Well, this is a good metaphor, I think, the musical metaphor. Let's just think of this for a minute. I don't propose that a mathematical model of a brain or a plant or something would be as wonderful as a brain or a plant. Life will not be replaced by language. We never demand that much of ordinary language or poetry or of the graphic arts. Nevertheless, the evolution of music has been greatly aided by musical notation, but we wouldn't like music to end and simply be left with a library of musical scores. Nevertheless, the evolution of music, the evolution of culture has been enormously facilitated by having a graphic language that can, to some extent, recall the actual musical experience. And this is the role that I'm proposing for mathematics, not to replace the earth or the heavenly realms, but just somehow to facilitate the traffic through, let us say, simply an analog on the same level of musical staff notation that pertains to the visual experience of space-time patterns, whether a flowering garland or the waving sea or the psychedelic vision.
Main body of the fish with this.
Maybe I need to tell you of last week in Denmark. I attended a conference about chaos theory and its applications, and I showed this video. There was in the audience another speaker who is the world expert on algorithmic information theory. This is a way of telling the difference between chaos and randomness. And as Terence was saying, there is in verbal representation a kind of economy, that there's a simple formula that calls forth a complex experience. And this economy is the reason that language is interesting. Algorithmic information theory gives a way of measuring randomness, and what seems to us as random sometimes can be generated by a very small code or a musical staff notation, for example. And when data from a scientific experiment looks random, one can try to test it as to whether there is or isn't a compact economical model for it. And if there is, it's more chaotic and less random. So there's a measure for this. And a truly, according to their definition, a truly random process which would provide data which could not be represented by any formula shorter than itself. Mm-hmm. But it turns out that the weirdest, most random looking data from the natural world, for example, earthquakes, sunspots, and so on, always seems to have a very compact mathematical model. Therefore, it's not truly random, it only looks random, and this is what is called deep data. So what I'm suggesting is an increase in our encyclopedia of models, extending language, so that we can name store, retrieve, and recreate not the experience itself, but the data of it, as it were, for the sake of communication with something which is very small, so that many of these models can be put in the closet. And this is exactly what musical staff notation did for music. It pertains not only to the spiritual experience, but also to fundamental questions on the future of human societies, environmental problems. Can we understand the space-time nature of the planet well enough, since it's so complex, to even be sensitive to it and cooperate with it? I mean, if we can't even understand what we're seeing when we look at the planet, then there's not much we can do to cooperate. Geography, for example, is a botanical field that could be revolutionized by a staff notation for space-time pattern, which it doesn't have.
But surely what we're looking for is meaning that seems to us somehow full of significance. I mean, in terms of information, even patterns, we've got libraries full. You go into any bookshop and you're just overwhelmed by the quantity of stuff there. And the idea of just having more, even more models on the shelf, even more, somehow doesn't seem very exciting to me. I mean, what would be exciting would be to see some deep meaning in all of this. And maybe mathematics is one way to find the deep meaning in things. But if so, I'm not quite sure how.
Well, the taxonomy of plants is not full of meaning, and nevertheless vocabulary has evolved, so the exfoliate and all these words are put on a page, and then another botanist can read this, and I can tell, well, yes, this is the plant, therefore it's safe to eat it and have an experience. So I think a further development in evolution from the state of having language may be the generation of meaning. I mean, meaning is not given in the data. We have to grok things. We have to struggle and evolve understanding by some hermeneutical process. So, well, our language, as people said when printing began, that would be the end of memory. When writing began, that would be the end of history.
Well, in both cases, they were correct, I think.
Yes, but when language began, that's when we lost our connection with the natural world.
Well, maybe it was a kind of language, yeah. I mean,
Spoken language.
Maybe language processed acoustically, that it's not in the generation of it that you want to put your attention, but in the reception, decoding of it. That when language became something acoustically processed, it became so bloodless that it became then the willing servant of abstraction, which before had been an exotic and little explored branch of linguistic activity that suddenly burgeoned into the major concern of a lot of people. That language processed visually is here and now stuff of great density, and acoustical language permits a level of abstraction that creates a higher inclusiveness, but that's achieved by a necessary dropping out of detail.
I'm glad to hear you say so, since it almost sounds that you think the logos itself is speech. But I must say I'm astonished at the resistance I'm getting here to the idea of visual language. I think that, well, when I travel in France, I'm riding in a train or something, and I'm really bothered by all the gossip going around, because I understand French, and then I realize this couple is having trouble, and the train is not stopping in the station that I expected, and so on. When I travel in Japan, I don't understand anything, so it seems to me it's really silent there. It's very quiet. I just don't hear anything. And where we have an oral language for a certain phenomenon, we then perceive it. It is moved by a moving truck. This moving then comes along and transports itself from the unconscious system to the conscious system. Then we deal with it in a different way. And these visions, space-time patterns, which we can't recognize, for which we have no visual language, they are essentially unconscious to us, so therefore we can't interact with them. And this might be a fundamental reason that the planet is dying. Either we shouldn't have verbal language, or we should have verbal language and visual language as well, I'm not sure which. But since verbal language is so poorly adapted to space-time patterns, I mean, we don't describe music in verbal language. We have staff notation, a visual language for music, and I think that our intellectual relationship to the sky and to the earth would be vastly improved by developing a larger closet of models for visual processes.
Oh,
But I think ready to agree to this.
No, I agree. I agree. I think you're right that seeing language, I regard language as some kind of project that is uncompleted as we sit here, that it isn't the transfer of thought and intention into speech. That doesn't do it. I mean, clearly, you know, the whole world is held together by small mouth noises, and it's only barely held together by small mouth noises. If we could have a tighter network of communication, we would, in a sense, be a less diffuse species. Communication, the lack of it, is what's shoving us over the brink into possible planetary catastrophe of the psychedelic experience, because then you see that if you buy into the idea that psychedelics...
Alright, that's about all I can accomplish at the moment. The sky is still very wet, and all of the surrounding area, so trying to put a knuckle or a pinky down to steady a detail is getting tricky. Oh, we still got 2 minutes, I might take that little spot of ice.
Maybe what all this technology is about is actually a more explicit condensation of the word. I mean, it is interesting that modernity is characterized by an ever more explicit evocation of the image. I mean, you just have to go back 100 years, and the best anything could do is an albumin tint photograph. Now we have, you know, color lithography, HD TV, high-speed printing, virtual reality. It's as though, you know, language is becoming, the word is becoming flesh, and condensing into the visual realm would make it, would be almost a kind of telepathy compared to the kind.
Alright, but that kind of pushes me to the edge of the time on this segment of the memory card. So I zoom in a little.
Well, I think, I mean, what we made...
So there you have it. Started on an angelfish in the sky. The clouds behind him will probably be pinks and grays, and this he will be detailed with more yellows, as well as just more detail color throughout his body. But I want him to be fairly realistic, like the blue jay that will be on the left side, as well as the central figure and the bald-faced hornet and the canoe figure. So the ants, however, will be kind of cartoony, I think, but that's down the line. And also the leaves, I think I want to leave sort of flat and playful, rather than realistically rendered on each leaf. There we go. Alright, so that's it for the moment. Thank you for watching. That's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Contact. Have a good night, Earth.